You're listening to The Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello again and welcome back to The Photography Pod, a podcast for photographers, both working professionals and enthusiasts alike. My name's Steve Vaughan.
And I'm Nick Church.
Hey Nick, how you doing, mate? How's things?
Well, I'm trying to avoid saying the same thing every time, which is really busy. But in particular, I am particularly busy.
Don't knock it. If you're busy, it's good.
I know, I shouldn't. But it's been well bust, isn't it? And we always complain when we're too busy and then complain when there's no bookings. So I'm up your way tomorrow. So I'm in Banbury shooting a wedding, I know. So I'm trampling on your well-trodden turf in Oxfordshire tomorrow. Then I have a wedding back in Somerset on Friday. Some camper van shoot on Saturday and an evening event on that's on Friday, and an evening event on Saturday that I'm shooting for it's a friend of mine's 50th birthday. So that's a completely random selection of things, and that's what my summer's like at the moment, which is great. It is. I love the variety of it.
That's good. And actually, of course, that was last week because they were recording this a week early. So all those things have happened by the time people hear this podcast. So,
that's very true. Yeah. So, that's very true. Or any other news references will be a week out of date as well.
That's right. Yeah. It's that confusing thing about record time and publish time, which does my head in at times. So we got a week off. So we did have a week off, a weekend off from weddings. We've got no weddings this weekend. We've got a wedding fair. Which even though we're not sort of chasing business anymore, we're still doing a couple of wedding fairs around places that we like working. And a few other bits and pieces as well. Samantha's off to Florida in a couple of weeks' time. My jammy so-and-so, my wife's heading off to the States. We've got best friends from when we used to live in America a few years ago, and they've retired to Florida. So we get a free holiday to Florida, apart from the flights, of course. But I've got to stop here and look after the dogs. Look at me.
Did you draw straws? Or how did that work?
That's always works that way. Yeah, they're her dogs, but I have to look after them. So I hope she's not listening to this. She'll kill me.
The other things I've done today are I took which is one of the bravest moves for a photographer, is to upgrade the firmware on my Sonys. I take a very kind of risk versus reward approach to update the firmware, but because of the issues I had last week, which hopefully no one noticed too much, but my camera kept dying, so it was overheating. So I'm hoping that will be. I'm hoping that will be fixed. And the other thing is, you were very rude about my T-shirt last week. I had a T-shirt with the view meters on it, which was a bit on brand, but my washing machine agreed with you and it tore it to pieces.
Really?
Yeah, so I thought you'd be pleased to hear that.
A self-centering washing machine, yeah, love it.
I know. But I was disappointed. It was my first wear and it was from my sister-in-law, so I was a bit disappointed. Might get another one. Just
get your money back or replace the washing machine. One of the two.
So tell me, Steve, have you ever shot? This is Steve Vaughan I'm talking to now. Have you ever shot any celebrities or anyone well known in your exploits?
Not intentionally, no. No, we've had, I think the most exciting people we've ever had at a wedding was Alan Sugar's sister, would you believe? That's not particularly exciting. You're going to tell me you've shot Royal Family now or something? Yeah.
Well, most weekends I do an A-lister of some sort. No, I did once, and the daft thing was I didn't even realise it was someone famous. So it was only when we were having our wedding consultation meeting where we go through group shots and things like that. Yeah. And the groom asked me if I could take a shot of the groom and his groomsman's shoes. Okay. And I asked why would that be? Because it seemed like you have some odd requests at weddings, but that was unusual. And he said that they had a shoe sponsor. And so I said, well, and what job do you do then, Johnny? And it was Johnny May, the England top scorer winger, rugby union winger. So, but I had no clue until virtually the week before the wedding.
I must admit, I probably wouldn't know him if I walked next to him, really, because I'm a round ball man rather than an oval ball man. But yeah, exciting.
I think you might though. He's ridiculously handsome. But to this day, interesting fun fact, the top hit for my website. People, you can search how people come to your website. Yeah. It's Johnny May's wife is the search term that the most number of people to my website. So
is she particularly famous or glamorous, or what is it about?
She's lovely. Wife? They're both a really lovely couple, actually. Okay. But I suspect so. But anyway, so talking of shooting people that are well known, that brings us on to today's guest, because we have with us a photographer called Steve Gerrard, who I'm very excited to have on the show. Steve's a music photographer, but does weddings and portraiture as well. He basically does it all, and infuriatingly, he's the master of the jack of all trades, master of none doesn't apply, because you look through his website, it's just fantastic photography across any genre. So I do recommend people go and take a look at his website, which is stevegerrard.com, I believe. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Well, you're more than welcome. So you're based in Montreal, is that right?
I am. Sunny Montreal today. It's a beautiful day. I'm originally from the UK, from Chester. Lived in Birmingham for most of my life, and then
nothing wrong with that.
10 years ago.
Stick together, West Midland boys. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I lived about 5 minutes from the Villa ground.
Did you? Okay, we'll have a whole another conversation about that another time. Which is a point of order, actually, before we go any further. We've got two Steves on this particular podcast, so I think we perhaps might say Steve G or Steve V or Steve Gerrard or Steve Vaughan, and I'll take a back seat on that one.
Good idea. So Steve G, Gerrard. So like many professional photographers, photography wasn't the first thing that you started working on, but yours was a bit mostly as IT or sales, like Steve, or something else. You were a DJ working around Europe. Is that right?
Well, around the world, actually. Yeah, I DJed all over the world for several years. My love of music kind of took me away from Birmingham, and like DJed all kinds of random places from China and Argentina to Australia and Moscow. I also opened for Oasis at Wembley Stadium, which is kind of a big deal, which is very, very cool. Obviously, everyone's talking about Oasis at the moment. But yeah, and to be honest, my traveling around the world was part of how my love of photography grew. I've always been a viewer of photography rather than like a participant in it up until about 20 years ago. I always loved photography books and things like that, and I had my favorite photographers, but didn't really take pictures of any worth. But then because I was traveling, I was like, I really need to be documenting these places that I'm going to and exploring them with a purpose. So photography kind of gave me a purpose to get out there and explore these places rather than just walking around looking like some person who's lost in the middle of China. Having a camera and a reason to be walking around kind of worked for me. And then I just kind of got the bug, and then my love of photography meant that I wanted to start shooting bands when they were playing in Birmingham or wherever. And I think it's just kind of spiraled from there, really, and I haven't looked back.
Fantastic. And the bands, the photography of bands. So and when you say that, do you mean the live music or sort of band portraits and things?
Well, it started off just live music, just getting down in the pit, seeing my favorite bands and taking my camera with me with permission rather than trying to sneak it in like I used to. I had a few tricks for getting my camera into gigs early on when I was just taking pictures for fun, but then it became more of a deliberate thing. And then as soon as that kind of started taking off and people started noticing my concert photography, then people started saying, oh, we need some new pictures of our band for MySpace.
MySpace, remember that? Gosh,
let's just date us. And then, that led into all kinds of other photography. But like you mentioned, I do jack of all trades, probably master of some. But yeah, the common theme is people. So even though I shoot weddings and portraits and all that kind of stuff, it started out in the music side and then kind of branched from there.
And that's certainly where I've sort of seen you first, was the music photography, and just loved it and viewed upon it with absolute envy. Because I think when I started, it was something that, like a few photographers I've spoken to, is something that people get into. And I think it's because bands are always up for having photos. It's quite hard, certainly in the UK, as you know, compared with something like America, for people to have their photo taken, because we're not naturally the sort of characters that like having a picture taken, but bands always need photos. Absolutely. The problem is they haven't got any money to spend on it. So that was my, so to see, I thought there must be a way that, there must be people that do take these amazing shots. And that's how I first came across your work. But looking through your website, I can see that you do the weddings and portraiture as well. And I think if the listener wants to have a look, then go on to stevegerrard.com, because I think the shots are just fantastic. They're vibrant and full of life and colour. I really love the treatments you put on them.
Totally agree, yeah.
And that there's real consistency across those genres. Is that something, Steve, that you're intentionally aiming to do, or is it just something that evolves?
It definitely evolved. Like when I started doing weddings, I think I was kind of trying to take pictures of what I thought people wanted, and just kind of very traditional, the kind of checklist of wedding photos, if you will. And then it was somebody said to me, this music side of what you do is very cool. I don't see any of that in your wedding photography. Why don't you try injecting that into weddings? And to be honest, at the time I was like, how the hell do I make, like, there doesn't seem to be any like comparison there. They're completely different things. But I think the moment that something clicked with me was when I was taking pictures of a groom and his groomsmen, and suddenly realized that I was doing it in exactly the same way as I would be doing a band with the front man. And then, it just made them look cool, which is what groomsmen wanted. They just want to look cool. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can start trying things that other people are not doing, and being a bit quirky, depending on the client, if they'd be up for that. And then that kind of helped me to start to stand out in wedding photography, which was hard then and is even harder now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I found myself enjoying wedding photography a lot more once I started to kind of just go, you know what, I can do whatever I want. And if people like it, they like it. And some people will and some people won't.
What's the split,
the way,
Steve?
Isn't it? If you're
is there like a split between weddings and bands? What's the split there? Yeah, what's the...
Financially, there's a big split.
I bet.
Weddings definitely helps pay the bills.
Yeah.
Not, as you mentioned, that, in music photography, there's bands don't have a lot of money. Occasionally, somebody comes along who's got a decent budget.
Sure.
Or maybe it's a magazine or the management, they've got a decent budget. But a lot of the time, people are really kind of trying to get value for money. But because I love it, then I quite often try and help them out. As far as time is concerned, I spend a lot more time shooting music than I do weddings.
Interesting.
I spend a lot more time editing weddings than I spend editing music.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Is your kit the same, Steve, between the different genres? Are you using the same camera setup, lenses?
Yeah, same cameras. Usually for concert photography, you're not allowed to use any flash. Yeah. It's kind of the industry rule, 3 songs, no flash. So you get the first 3 songs of a set and you're not allowed to use flash. Occasionally you are allowed, but it's quite rare, especially in Montreal. I used to be able to use flash more when I was in the UK if I needed to. But to be honest, it kind of kills the vibe a lot of the time.
Absolutely, I can imagine.
Flashy concerts. But the same cameras. I've always been Canon since day one. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to gear. If it works,
absolutely.
It works.
Yeah. It looks like you're, 24 mil a lot of the time, that kind of focal length? For your wedding stuff?
A mix, usually primes. I do kind of stick with primes, but I mix it between 24, 35, 50 and 85. I do have a 7200 that I drag out if I can't get close to the action. But that's the only reason, really. And that's the same for concert photography. If I'm shooting a big festival or an arena, then the 70-200 comes out. But most of the time, I'll stick to the primes if I can.
Steve, you made it sound very matter of fact about the process of getting into band photography. But I know lots of photographers who cut their arm off to get the opportunity to photograph bands. So just say a bit more about how you actually made the transition from being the DJ to being allowed into the pit. That's not a simple thing. So how did that actually happen? What was the process that sort of got you in there?
Actually, the DJing did have a little bit of input in that because I was already like making connections with venues and clubs because I was DJing. I was running club nights.
Okay.
Nick, I actually used to run the Friday nights at Bristol Academy.
Wow.
for quite a few years. Yeah. So I DJ'd there, but I was also like the promoter. So because I knew some of those people, I started to get in because I knew the people at the venues. Right. So actually the first band that I ever shot, usually their first band is like their mate's band in a garage around the corner or a pub down the road. My first band was Megadeth at Birmingham Academy.
Wow.
Which was just because of the connections that I had there, because I was running a club night at Birmingham Academy as well as Bristol Academy. But I always say to people, like, if they want to get into photography, as far as shooting concerts is concerned, you just have to reach out to bands who are playing, maybe like smaller bands to begin with. And in return for you offering to give them some photos, like you mentioned, bands need photos, they need content more than ever. They'll put you on the guest list and you just save money getting into the shows. You can go, you kind of have free reign, you can experiment, you can see what your gear can do, you can work with tricky lighting, which is like the big thing that you have to get over with concert photography. You don't have any control over lighting or things like that. Yeah. You can't tell people, oh, can you just stand over there when they're in the middle of the guitar solo? So the way to really get into it is to experiment in an environment where you have that freedom to experiment and you don't have 3 songs and then you're out. So getting in touch with bands, you're not going to make any money to begin with, but you might save a bit of money getting into the gig. As soon as people start asking you to take pictures because they've seen somebody else's pictures, which that happens quite easily because bands know bands. But as soon as they come to you saying, we need some pictures, that's when you start saying, okay, what's your budget? What can you afford? And then it kind of goes from there.
And I guess at that point, like you say, you've gone through the lower pressure shoots where you're doing it for maybe a free entry ticket. Yeah. And so you haven't got the pressure of exactly. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you've learned a bunch from each gig that you do. So by the time you are charging, then you've got a bit more experience under your belt.
Yeah.
I suppose it's not a million miles from most how people start doing weddings, really. I mean, the first weddings most people doing, me included, was to help a mate out. And then thought, I quite like doing this. I wonder if I can charge for it. So I guess it's not a million miles from that, really, is it?
Yeah, exactly. The first wedding I ever shot, they had a photographer. I didn't know the couple. One of my friends was going to a wedding and I just wanted to kind of try it out. And they were like, yeah, come along. To be honest, I probably overstepped a little mark with the mark with the other photographer a little bit. Now that I think about it, but I kind of tried to stay out of the way. And then later on, I found out that they liked my pictures more than the photographer they booked, which kind of gave me the confidence to sort of go, okay, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, I bet you were popular, Steve, with the other photographer. Who cares?
We won't say who the other photographer. I don't even know who the photographer was.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
So you've looking through your portfolio, Steve. You've worked with. I've got the list goes on. So it's Metallica. I mean, basically anyone's favorite musician. The likelihood is that you've shot a gig at some point. It goes from Snoop Dogg to Metallica to Megadeth, as you've said, Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber, which is pretty much the whole spectrum of music.
Quite a spectrum, yeah.
Yeah. When people say, "Oh, have you shot any bands that I know?" When they find out I'm a music photographer, at this point, it's kind of easier to say bands I haven't shot.
What's your favourite band?
That's it.
Because I was, I know you're a big Pearl Jam fan, as I am, and I recently went to Barcelona to see Pearl Jam because I hadn't seen them for years, and it was just an amazing performance. And I was sobbing from most of it. Completely overwhelmed, and I was just trying to think, what would it be like? Because I could see a photographer there, and I thought, how would that be if I was then in that environment shooting them? How would I separate the fan side of me from actually wanting to get the shots? Do you ever find that happens?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always that you're a fan. Like sometimes, I've shot Pearl Jam 3 times now, and it's always a buzz just being that close to a band that I love so much and I've grown up with. I went to their first ever UK show that they did back in '92 in Southend-on-Sea.
Oh wow!
It just was basically a bar with windows all down one side. But sometimes, I remember specifically one time I was photographing a band, which one of the people in the band was Slash from Guns N' Roses, and I kind of grew up with Guns N' Roses as well when I was a kid. And I just remember I was in the pits in that little area between the crowd and the stage, looking through my camera, and the whole frame was just filled with Slash. And I was just like, I can't believe that I'm just this close to this guy who's been part of my musical journey, and you do have those kind of moments. And sometimes it's not even somebody you maybe a massive fan of, but it's just somebody who the world knows, like Taylor Swift. I mean, I do like a lot of Taylor Swift's music, but they become iconic at this point. Or Paul McCartney, you're photographing a Beatle. You never get over that, really.
No, I can imagine you must get that overwhelming sort of sense of, wow, how, I've got to this point, you're carrying on shooting, but it's a bit of a reality check to think, wow, you've got to pat yourself on the back to get to that point.
Yeah. But at the same time, during those 3 songs, it tends to be a bit of a whirlwind. You almost don't hear the music for 3 songs because you're so focused on where to be and what the light's doing and all the other things that are beyond your control, and trying to make that work. And also, as cliche as it sounds, trying to tell a story. And I do try and tell a story with music photography. A lot of people, when they're starting out, don't. They're just like, this is what the person on stage looked like. And you don't get a sense of what it felt to be at the show. And that's something that I really try to do. So I get a collection of images that sort of do tell a story. And for those 3 songs, taking all those things into account and trying to make sure you get what you need, you kind of like, what did they even play? I can't even remember what they were.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about the storytelling. That's fascinating. So I guess it's not just for 3 songs, just close up to the guitarist, the lead vocalist, or whatever. You're trying to do a bit more sort of, I guess, the location a little bit, or stuff going on around them. I guess the fans. Isn't that the kind of thing you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I shot a band called Rise Against on Friday night, and amazing live band, great fun to shoot. And I came back with pictures of the band just before they went on stage, at the side of the stage, because I had a bit of extra access for the show. So they kind of warm up, then silhouettes, using when the lights changed, trying to make sure that I had pictures of how the lights were working with them, pictures from the front, pictures from the side, pictures from the back. So I actually was able to get on the back of the stage and shoot towards the crowd, big crowd. So then I was concentrating on what was happening in the crowd, and like picking out people who were on people's shoulders, or there was like a little kid down the front that was just like totally into it with his arms in the air. And that's always amazing to see.
Fantastic.
So it's all part of the story. And then taking wider pictures where you can see the band and the stage, and get a sense of like how that all kind of came together. So I posted 20 pictures to my Instagram from that show, because you can post 20 pictures now. And hopefully everyone is there for a reason, and everyone is slightly different. And when you look at that set of 20, you get a real sense of how it felt to be there, rather than just, like I say, what the guitarist looked like, what he was wearing, what guitar he was playing.
Amazing.
It's trying to get that variety and give people a sense of, if they were there, reminding them of how it felt to be there, and if they weren't there, letting them know what they miss.
Fantastic.
And I suppose that is helped by not using flash, right? I mean, if you're using the venue lighting, you're picking up the atmosphere. There's that shot on your website of Richard Ashcroft where there's the different color lights behind you. You can see the sort of atmosphere and the slight haze in the air between you and him, and it's just very atmospheric photo.
Yeah, well, thanks. That was actually the Verve. It wasn't a Richard Ashcroft headline show. It was when he was in the Verve, a while ago. But yeah, that's what it is. Like, flash can kill it sometimes, and kind of, people spend a lot of money on lights when they get to that level of production. And even if sometimes a band, they might be a huge band, but their lighting is still dark. It's dark for a reason. They want that kind of drama to it. So your job is really to sort of capture the drama rather than throwing flash in there to lighten everything up when it's not really meant to look like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. How does from a business point of view, and I don't want you to uncover your whole business strategy for doing this. But how does it work? Who's your client for a band like, let's say, Metallica or Megadeth or someone like that? Who's the client? Is it the band themselves, the record label? How does it work?
Usually it's like a magazine or a music blog. Somebody who's doing a review of the show maybe and needs the images to complement the writer's review. When I shot Rise Against on Friday, that was working for the band's management. So they contacted me. Can you do any of these dates? That was the only one that I could do. So then they send you a shot list that this is what we need. And sometimes it's very specific and you're like, okay, like for Friday, one of the shots they wanted was the drummer shot from the front with his arms in the air.
Okay.
I'm like, what if that doesn't happen? What if it happens when I'm at the side of the stage?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's very specific. And I think it's just like what they dream. It's not like you didn't get the shot, so you're not going to get paid. So yeah. Drop my earbud. Yeah, and then other times sometimes you can be working for the company who made the guitar or the drums. There's lots of people who need images from shows, but most of the stuff that you'll probably see on my website was done working for magazines or music blogs.
Right.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that's quite useful I know one of the questions from our Facebook group, the Photography Pod, was about how one might get into that. You know, how do you generate income? You know, so it's above the getting free entry to a club type level, and it sounds like there's a few routes, either through bands finding you by shooting other bands, management companies, and publications as well.
Yeah,
who's your favourite person that you've worked with?
That's a hell of a question.
Do you mean artist?
Yeah, his favourite artist you've worked with, yeah. Because your favourite people is Steve and I. But in shooting music.
No, it's the whole of Pearl Jam. That's his favourite.
Well, I mean, a lot of the time I don't even get to interact with them. You know, they're on stage,
sure.
I'm in the pit, and they're done. On Friday with Rise Against, because I had more access and I was working for the management, then, you know, they came off stage and immediately came over to thank me for taking pictures, which is just really, really nice. A lot of people wouldn't do that. I have been lucky enough to go on tour with a couple of bands occasionally, not for like months and months like some people I know. But there's a band called Gojira. They're a metal band. They actually played at the Olympics in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
Yeah, and I got to go on a few days with them. So that meant not just taking pictures of the concert, but like hanging out with them, taking portraits, taking pictures of them, just hanging out backstage, which is definitely not like a Motley Crue documentary. It's more like people just catching up on their emails or checking their phone.
So it's not like Spinal Tap then? It's not everybody?
No,
Okay.
Not like Spinal Tap. No Stonehenge on that one.
My favourite movie of all time, by the way, guys. Yeah,
that's a good reference amazing. For the younger listener out there.
Yeah. My wife still hasn't seen Spinal Tap. She's Canadian, and
Shame
she needs to. She needs to.
Yeah,
oh, brilliant movie.
But what was the question?
Well, I suppose it was about who's your favourite person that you.
Oh yeah, so Gojira. We were talking about Gojira.
Yeah.
So now when I worked with them, they were much smaller bands. Now they're headline arenas. But I have to say, they're some of the loveliest people that I've ever been able to work with. Even though they play this loud, aggressive music, quite often I find that the people who play that kind of music are just the sweetest. Like most humble people, then I think they get all their anger out through the music and then end up being just like super chill in between.
Yeah, I agree. And I think
that was
a lot
a pleasure to do.
You see a lot of metal bands that I've sort of seen interviewed, and bands, I've been a band myself, so bands you play with, it's generally musicians are pretty chilled out, bunch of people, they're very inclusive. You know, it's that kind of environment. The arts is an inclusive, chilled out kind of group of people, and bands like Slayer have to put on a bit of a facade around it to sort of not lean into that too much. But do you find that when you're shooting musicians on stage, like with a bride and groom or someone in portrait, some people just take a better photo than others. Some people more photogenic. Do you find people that you think, wow, like let's say it's Slash, just whatever angle, he just looks fantastic, and other musicians aren't as much? Or
Yeah, I guess that is true. Some people are just not as forthcoming on stage. They don't perform as much. They just play their instrument to the best of their ability, and it all depends. You know, photographing James Blunt for 3 songs. Yeah. After the 3rd song, you're kind of done. You know what I mean? But then there's other bands who, after the first 3 songs, they're just getting warmed up, and it's completely unknown what happens next. And the worst thing is when you get those first 3 songs and then you spend the rest of the set in the crowd going, oh, that would have made a good shot. Oh, that would have made a good shot. I wish I was in the pit for that. It can be frustrating. And at the same time, if I go to a show without my camera, I'm constantly like, oh, I wish I'd been able to shoot that. That would have been cool. No. But yeah, some people are just born performers, aren't they? And some people are bass players.
Exactly. I was, when I was performing, because I used to be the singer, I was a bass player, but in the role of a singer. So I would do nothing, and I would be the biggest challenge, I think, for a photographer to try and get a photo where I just didn't look like I was.
But I suck on the bass. That's probably why I'm not good at the bass. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we shouldn't be mean about bass players. I mean, there are people like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden and Nicky Sixx. You know, they're bass players, but they're amazing to shoot as well. Yeah. And then you have somebody like Geddy Lee from Rush who is doing vocals and playing bass and playing keyboards at the same time.
You're talking my era, Steve. That's my all-time favourite band, I'm afraid, because I'm older than you guys.
Oh, is it?
Massive
Canadian?
Rush head, yeah, Canadian. There you go. I do a plug here. I do a weekly internet radio show. I'm not a proper DJ like you, but I do a weekly rock show.
I'm not anymore.
And that's the kind of stuff I play. I am doing a request show, so before you go, I'll get a request from you from there. Have you ever felt threatened at any time in the job? I'm thinking now the music stuff rather than weddings. I mean, that happens as well, as we know. But in the music stuff, have you ever felt uncomfortable or ever felt, this isn't right, I need to get out of this kind of scenario?
Yeah, well, actually, I shot a gig last week, a band called Nails, who are the heaviest band, like hard as nails. Okay. Probably one of the heaviest bands in the world at the moment. Like, amazing at what they do, but it's brutal, and it's most people wouldn't even get it at all. But when I was the only photographer for the gig, actually, and when I arrived to get my photo pass, they said, we have strict instructions for you. This pass will get you to the side of the stage, either side. But for your own safety, and that was the words they used, we don't want you in the front of the stage.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, understood. And I kind of knew why, because I'd seen that band a few times before. And but it was still great. Like I had good access to get it.
So what happened then? Is it mosh pits and
mosh pits? Just like quite aggressive mosh pits. And I've been in mosh pits before where people have ran at me and my camera's smacked against my face and I've started bleeding.
Oh, wow.
I've shot gigs where the guitarist hit me in the head with his guitar. And I've been bleeding as well. Yeah, not intentionally, just accidentally, because you just get caught up in the energy of it all.
Could have damaged his guitar.
One funny story was when I shot 30 Seconds to Mars, which is Jared Leto's band,
yeah, I've heard of them, yeah.
Who's obviously famous for all kinds of things. I was working for a magazine called Rock Sound in the UK. And most photographers had to shoot from the front of house, which is the sound desk. So they were further back and it was an arena show. But because I was working for that magazine and they were doing like a full review, they gave me extra access to go down the front. And I guess to try and get some variety, because they needed variety for the magazine, not just one shot from the soundboard. Mm-hmm. So I went down and met the tour manager. He's like, oh, you can go here, 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 and here. And when he starts, there's like a big intro, so you want to make sure you're right in the front of the stage. And so I went down there, show started. As soon as Jared Leto spotted me, this is in an arena with thousands of people, he turned around and was like signaling to people and refused to turn back towards the crowd and me until I was escorted out.
Awkward.
And I have no idea why he had that much of a strong reason for not wanting pictures from that close up. But yeah, I felt very weird about that whole situation. It was kind of, I didn't feel particularly threatened.
That wasn't personal against you. It was just that you were taking photos in that proximity. And
yeah, he obviously just didn't want people there, and there was a miscommunication between whoever. Wasn't
that he hated your photos or something?
No, I was just told where I could be, and I was there, and then apparently he didn't agree that I was allowed to be there.
Very tough.
But yeah, it's the big metal shows and some of the hardcore shows that can be. You have to be careful. You have to pay attention to who's moving around you. Some of the big shows where you've got crowd surfers coming over the barrier. You're facing the stage trying to get the shot that way, but they're coming over the barrier behind your head.
Right.
So usually security are pretty good about kind of giving you the heads up that somebody's coming your way, but you do have to kind of have eyes in the back of your head sometimes to avoid being hurt. But it's fun. I love it.
I've got a question, but up to you, Nick. Go on,
I was going to say, it was reminding me of speaking to, we had a footage journalist that works in war zones last week talking on the show. And it's similar to that. It's like, that situational awareness is critical to be
for sure. I wouldn't really compare it, but sometimes it might get a bit closer.
So my question, Steve, if you could photograph any band that you haven't, or performer you haven't photographed, either alive or dead, or in history or whatever, who would that be?
I mean, there's still big bands that I haven't shot that are still touring, like the Rolling Stones.
Right.
I've never shot Foo Fighters, which is weird. If I could shoot any band from history, like go back in the day, then you put me on the spot now. I mean, maybe the Sex Pistols in '77, like at the 100 Club, where people were spitting on each other.
You had to wear a raincoat and a brolly, weren't you?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, there's people that I never got to see that I would love to have just seen, never mind photograph. People like Jeff Buckley. I'm a big fan of Jeff Buckley.
Yeah, completely.
But, any of these kind of iconic bands from over time, going back to the 60s and photographing Bob Dylan, that kind of stuff would be
amazing.
Pretty amazing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Any more from you, Nick?
No, that's just been fascinating. Have you got, before we let you go, Steve, have you got any, working with all of these artists and bands, any memorable stories that stand out, things that may have happened, that were ones that you don't want to risk getting sued about?
Apart from the Jared Leto story, let me think. I mean, I think one of the interesting things for me is that, there is this industry standard of the first 3 songs. And sometimes that can be stretched either way. So, as an example, Nicole Scherzinger, who was, she was in Pussycat Dolls or something like that, when she went solo, she gave photographers 1 minute in the pit. And the first half of that, like first 30 seconds, she was just a silhouette at the back of the stage. And it's just like, how are you meant to get anything from that? I've heard rumors that Bob Dylan only allows people 1 frame.
Wow.
Like they have to go click and then you're out. Whether that's true or not, I couldn't tell you 100%.
And
but
imagine
there's
other bands that on in the film days.
Yeah. They're watching you. There's other bands that let you shoot the whole show. I've had that sometimes, which is good and bad because you get a lot of variety, but you kind of don't get to enjoy the show quite as much. But then, like one time I was shooting 9 Inch Nails and they gave me songs 11, 12 and 13. Now I love 9 Inch Nails. I'm a big fan. And but it meant that for the first 10, 11 songs of the set, I was just kind of going, I think we're on 9. And it's kind of,
I wouldn't even think to keep track.
Yeah. But then the weirdest one was a band called Peeping Tom. I don't know if you've heard them, but the singer is Mike Patton, who used to be in Faith No More.
Yeah.
Is he still in Faith No More, maybe? Anyway, for that one, we were told the last 3 songs. Now, how I'm supposed to know when the last 3 songs are was the challenge. But luckily, somebody kind of gave us a signal
you got
at that
list.
point. But I think for them, he didn't want to look all clean and fresh. He wanted to look like he'd been through the ringer for the pictures, which is cool. I respect
absolutely
that.
Is. Yeah. Steve, it's been fascinating hearing your stories. I could talk for hours or listen to you for hours, more the point, really. I'm going to push you for my radio show. I'm going to push you for a request. Vaguely, it's got to be rock, but apart from that, you can pick any song or any band you like.
Rock within what all kinds of genres?
Classic rock, prog rock, metal, just as long as it's not hip hop or dance music, I'll play it.
Okay, well, I could be greedy and go for something like November Rain, so I'd take up half of your radio show.
That's fine. There's less requests.
I would say Stinkfist by Tool.
Good choice.
Because it's not an obvious one, but it's just still a classic, and I still get a buzz every time that I open it.
I don't think I know that. I'm going to...
I know the band. I don't know the track, but I know Tool. The band.
Check that one out.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll make a note of that one. So it'll be, by the time this goes out, you'll have heard it the week before. So, but thank you again. It's been fascinating listening to you, and please stay on for the sort of last 15 minutes or so of the show if you can. It'd be great to get you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah. It's fun.
It's been fantastic. So, Nick, great guest. Thanks for organising. Fantastic.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, best guest ever. He said that every week. But
it's had a choice of two so far, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what else have we been up to? So from an industry news perspective, what have you seen this last couple of weeks, Nick?
I've seen that DJI are in a spot of bother in the US because there is they're going to be restricted, or it looks like they'll be restricted from selling their new model drones in the US market due to fears of spying, Chinese manufacturer. So it's currently going through, I'm not an expert on the political system in the US, but through Congress or the Senate or whatever, but it's got a certain path through there, and it's expecting that it will get approved that they will be banned from selling their new drones. So people with the older drones can still fly them. So that's going to hit their market share quite a lot.
Yeah. I guess would that apply in Canada as well, Steve? I mean, what tends to happen in the States tends to get mirrored in Canada often.
I'm not sure how much it mirrors it, but I know that to fly a drone, you do have to do like a course now.
Yeah, we do.
And get like a proper approval. And the course is a few days, I think. It's not just like a few hours.
Depends on the weight of the drone normally. But
right. Yeah. I've never used the drone, so I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I know people who do. So yeah, it's definitely, I can understand as well, why they need to be very like safety first sort of thing, because you can just imagine how many things you can do with a drone.
It's more, I think, in this, what Nick's referring to, it's the US government are worried about Canadian.
The
Chinese companies flying drones over the United States and then sending information back to China. I think that's the fear, isn't it? Yeah.
There's some strange wording that the ban is going to be any connected drone, but of course DJI require that connection. It has to be, there has to be connectivity to the handset, whether it's your phone or the RC controller. And they're worried about the potential for basically having satellite imagery being shipped back or private data being sent back to China. So that's going to be quite interesting to keep an eye on that. What about you, Steve?
So on DJI, they've got a new action camera coming out because I'm quite an action camera fan. I don't know why, because I don't use them professionally, but I do have several here. One of these days, I'm actually going to do some vlogging if I ever get the confidence. But I've got the Osmo Action 4, but there's a 5 coming out. It'll be out by the time people listen to that, which seems to have some exciting new stuff on it, really. So the quality out of them are amazing, actually, these little action cameras, as long as you've got the light, of course.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of videographers that use them for my weddings. Just as a good locked off angle, and the footage is fantastic considering the size of it. Really good.
Yeah, so that's supposed to be out. The new GoPro 13 seems to be quite lukewarm received. It seems to be just repackaged, the old stuff really. So in other news, my camera's getting fixed. My A7R4, which was poorly, looks like the IBIS unit was fried on it, so not quite as serious as I feared. So I can't use that as an excuse to buy a new one, unfortunately. Samantha would veto that, really. That's
she's away.
Pardon?
She's away now, so you
that's true, yeah. Genius.
You get your skates on.
Yeah. Oh, while you're away, Samantha, look what I bought. Yeah, that'll go down like a cup of cold sick, probably. But I bear the idea in mind. On the techie stuff, I mentioned on the last show that I'd just been on a flash photography workshop with a phenomenal Colombian photographer called Christian Cardona. Steve is worth checking out. For something very different in terms of amazingly created flash images. But something he did do, and I'd like both of your thoughts on this actually, something he was very, very, very keen on, is that he always shoots in Adobe RGB. He shoots RAW, but he always shoots Adobe RGB even though his output to things like pick time and to the print companies he use is in sRGB, which I guess is what all of us do, really. And his view was that even though you're going to export in a restricted color gamut, you're capturing in a wider color gamut, so you're getting more information, more data. Now, I did that at the last wedding, and just looking at the edit, it does seem richer even after I've exported it. So whether I'm fooling myself or I haven't done the wedding, by the way, I've just done some previews, but whether I'm fooling myself there or there's something in it. So have either of you two ever played with doing that? And what are your thoughts if so?
No,
I've heard about it. I've heard about people doing it. I've never done it myself, but I would be interested to try it out and see if I can notice a difference. But it could be a placebo thing, maybe.
Well, I wonder that. Yeah. No,
we have to send you. We have to send you, Steve, five or six shots. Some of which are Adobe RGB and some are sRGB.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, it's something I've not even thought about. Other than the only thing that I've ever think about is making sure it matches throughout the whole kind of shooting, edit, delivery, workflow. But it makes sense. It is a wider gamut, and presumably there are. You want all that kind of information, even if you end up exporting.
I suppose it's on the basis that the more your IT background, but the more information you get in, the more you got to get out at the other side of it. I played a lot, and this is a whole can of worms and a rabbit hole to disappear down, but I played a lot around with display calibration and things, because although I use a MacBook now, I also use a PC, but I don't have an Apple monitor. I have a large Dell monitor, and I've tried to calibrate it so it looks like an iPhone, because Apple use their own color space, which is called Display P3, which is sort of P3 was developed for driving movies, would you believe? And it has a greeny white balance. So what the Apple profile is the P3 wider gamut, but using a traditional 6500 Kelvin white balance really. So I've calibrated my monitor. So hopefully when I export the photos, because let's be honest, most of our couples are looking on their phones first now, that actually they look consistent, because what you don't want is the phone call that says, my bridesmaid's dress looked different to what I expected, really.
You see this sort of, I'm coming up against this more often now, that in wedding films that I'm just editing a few at the moment, the default in Adobe Premiere is to use a gamut that's suitable for broadcast, or a gamma curve, rather than QuickTime or YouTube or anything else, which is what everyone's going to be watching. And you change that, and the colors are totally different. The contrast is much higher if you use broadcast, and the black's much deeper. So it's something I'm starting to think a bit more about. Yeah,
I mean, it's a whole topic for another show, really. But you can very quickly disappear down a rabbit hole and chase your tail almost on this kind of thing, really. I suppose the main thing is, do the images look pleasing to you, but more importantly to your client, really. And I guess in your work, Steve, with all the complex lighting on stage, it must be quite a challenge to edit it sometimes in terms of getting, are you trying to get realism, but in terms of consistency with what you saw on the day, really?
Yeah, definitely. You obviously get a lot of color casts and things like that, and trying to make the picture look as good as it can be, but without changing it too much from how it looked to be there is that can be the challenge. And sometimes, distracting things in the background that might not look as good. And that especially now with all the AI editing you can do in Photoshop and stuff, you can remove things, you can remove people, you can change colors and all this kind of stuff. Where do you stop with that? And are you, representing how documentary, proper documentary do you want to go with your concert photography? And I think that's just down to the individual at the end of the day. Do you want to be super artistic, or do you want to be as authentic and keep it real as you
great point. We had interesting discussion about this with our guest last time, with Guy Peterson, who's very anti sort of AI manipulation of photojournalism images, because obviously what you want is authenticity of what was going on at the time, really. And I can see it'd be a challenge in your work, Steve. Yeah,
sort of on that balance, isn't it? A gig or a performance, it's not like a wedding, which doesn't, if there's a carrier bag in the back of a wedding shot, you want to remove it. If it's photojournalism, you definitely wouldn't. But it is a situation where people are looking at the photos and they want to be seeing what was there on the night. So
I suppose it's one way to get Jimi Hendrix, Mark Bolan, George Harrison all on stage, I suppose, at the same time with AI, but that would be cheating, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, Jimi Hendrix. That would have been another good choice for my
it would.
I want to shoot. Yeah.
But I think
one of my pet hates is when you've got like this cool band, and sometimes they can have like an amazing stage show and the outfits and all that kind of stuff, but then they've just got like these cheap water bottles next to them on the drum riser, and it's just like totally takes away from the whole scene, you know.
Yeah.
So you've got Kiss all sort of made up, but they've got like a packet of Pringles next to them or something.
Yeah.
It's like you're sort of losing the artist.
Potato-based snacks are available, yes. That wasn't an endorsement, yeah. Nick, I don't have a book this time. Do you have a movie to recommend?
I touched on it last time. It was Civil War, but I don't think I mentioned it properly. But by Alex Garland. And,
right.
Really great film set in sort of near future, semi-dystopian
post-apocalyptic, or
not quite that. It's literally, it's sort of a commentary on. You could almost see it as what may happen Trump-wise, that if those sorts of politics became overflowing, but it's not directly about that. But it's So there's lots of conflict going on between different factions, and as we could imagine now, when things happen, all the protests that happened in the UK recently, there were just dozens of photographers, amateur and professional, getting photos of them, getting some incredible photos of immersive photography. So all of these photojournalists are following around the troops, and each troop almost has their own. Excuse me. Each troop would have their own photojournalist team that's capturing those stills, and it talks about the area of. Should you, it doesn't matter what the story is, you have to capture the story regardless of how palatable it might be or otherwise. So it's an interesting film. It looks great. It's quite long, but I loved it. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, is that the one with Kirsten Dunst? And she's shooting film at one stage. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
Dear listener, thank you very much for joining us for the latest edition of the Photography Pod. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's been fascinating, Steve, having you on the show. Thank you ever so much for being with us again today. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show, to subscribe, because that way you'll make sure that you'll get each episode on time, and you can do so in Apple, Spotify. We are on YouTube, but also as an audio-only podcast at the moment. And if you can leave us a review on Apple or now Spotify, I believe, as well, it does help us in lots of mysterious ways. Nick, who are we hoping to get on the show next time?
Next time, we're hoping to get someone I've worked with several times is Geraint Roberts, who I know shoots a lot of. We talked last week about your passion projects and taking stuff out of your comfort zone. So Geraint shoots a lot of his work, certainly his own personal photography, in 35mm film.
All right.
I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about that. He did a trip to Japan where we took his film cameras.
That'd be awesome. That would take me back to my childhood. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which was a long time ago. Steve, thanks again for coming on the show. Nick, great to see you again, mate. Thanks for listening to us. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. Until then, happy shooting out there.